Hey Paul, it was great meeting with you earlier today. As promised, I just wanted to give you a quick run through of the materials that we will be working on, that we'll be using with the mentoring program for the GSSE students. So right here you can see we have our CSU VDP workbook. So this one's the template. I will make one for you that's specifically for you. And at the bottom where it says stages here, instead, we're gonna change those to each of the companies that you're mentoring, so that way you have everything in one place. This is your mentor guidebook, really. So this is something that we're not going to share with our students necessarily, but it's from the mentoring perspective and from an administrator perspective. We want to keep track of, how our student companies are progressing, and also, kind of take a proactive stance to some of the challenges that they might be facing. So going through this, you kind of have your legend here at the top. So you've got your key here. So these different letters correspond with assumptions, testing, validated, ongoing validation. And then the steps within each stage, which you can fill out here. And you can put various numbers here, depending on what stage and where they are at in the development of this. So go ahead and take a look at it when you get a chance while you're on vacation, if you have some spare time. But I'll just give you a quick run through of the different elements, and then also give you a quick run through of the worksheets that the students will also be working off of. So here you can see the different components to the startup. So we've got our problem and the different subsets underneath that. We've got our solution, opportunity market, competitive advantage. And then as you can see here, it starts to become grayed out. So when you see that it's grayed out, that means this is not in the conceptual stage for the company's development. Once we've moved past the conceptual stage, which most of the students that you've worked with previously and you'll be working with again should be in the early development stage. So some of them still may need some help in the conceptual fields. So in the early development and beyond, we've got our competitive advantage, marketing, sales, business model, culture, people, structure, our team, strategic planning, pitch, and for the GSSE students, this section here is also going to be really important. It's our impact. And so we put this optional because some of the student groups at the Institute aren't necessarily impact focused, although we would like everyone to have a thought process around impact, whether it be their local community or the greater general global community. But again, just some of these key elements underneath. And these are just kind of these highlighted yellow areas are really great areas that you can help bring to their students' attention so that they know how to better structure to move forward on their goal tracking. So now that we have our kind of business components and attributes, I wanted to walk through the stages. So most of the student groups that you'll be working with that are new will be in their conceptual stages. And the companies that you've worked with previously should now be in their early development phase and potentially ongoing development depending on how far along they are. But as you can see here, we start with conceptual, early development, ongoing development, in revenue, in profit, and finally growth. So this is kind of how we are going to make sure that we can support and stay with our student startups throughout the life cycle of their companies. So we provide this programming, as I mentioned earlier, even past graduation. So this is a really great way for us to keep in contact with our students and to make sure that we're helping them to manage this process going forward. Additionally, it's really great because let's say that you, for some reason, are not available to mentor the students ongoing. This is a great way for us to take the information that you've worked on with them and transfer it over to a potential new mentor down the line. Or let's say that they need a specific strategic mentor within a specific subset like stakeholder relations, customer vendors, things like that. We can get a industry expert to help them with that one small subset, and we can provide them a copy of what you've already worked on with them so that they understand and we're not duplicating efforts. I also wanted to show you down here, we have an example. So this is an example for a problem. they're going through the assumptions, walk through idea testing. So here's some of the different information that you can provide into these different subsets that let us know kind of where they're at and what they've worked on and what you've been focused on with them. It's really important that we make sure that our student startups take this process very seriously. I'm not as concerned about it with the GSSE students because they have a very structured program. However, we will have a lot of different entrepreneurs coming from all different walks of life, all different disciplines and professions and skill sets. And so we want to make sure that we do have a metrics tracking process so that we can make sure that it's not only of value to the students, but it's of value to our mentors as well. The last thing we want to do is waste your time, right? So this is a great way to make sure that our companies are constantly pushing the envelope. Now, in addition, so this is your mentor interface, and I would like to show you the two additional documents that the student companies will have to work on throughout the process that will accompany your venture development. That VDP stands for Venture Development Platform. So the first thing that they'll get is our goal tracking worksheet. So it's very simple, venture name, date. They list their progress that they've made to date, certain obstacles that they've come across, potential goals based off of the progress and obstacles that they'd like to achieve. And finally, we have action steps. So what actions are they going to take in the next 2 weeks to make sure that they're progressing and they're pushing the envelope to make sure that they're meeting these goals. We also have down here funding and correspondence with community partners. We found that oftentimes, especially when we have students who are, some of them are double majors, some of them are MBA students, they have a lot on their plate in terms of their class load and classwork, and we want to make sure that we are also supportive of them and helping them to really action for themselves these different steps that they need to take for their business, while at the same time making sure that they're not forgetting about anything important. So funding could be, we've got the pitch competition coming up, or we've got, an investor lead. So I want to make sure that I have on this radar, meeting with angel investor and then specific date. We also have correspondence with community partners. So it's really important that we're showcasing and teaching our student startups about thought leadership and how they need to be, it's not enough to be impact focused. You also need to have an element of thought leadership in what you're doing. And so building a community and different community partners is a great way to accelerate that. So we want to make sure that we're keeping this on our radar. So this is really just to keep on the radar so that to help our students really push the envelope and they don't forget about anything. But here, the top part, progress, obstacles, goals, and action steps, this is really where they're going to use the structured progress. We call it POGs. This is really where they're going to use this process to not only discover their goals, but make sure that they're constantly working towards achieving those goals. And as a mentor, what I would love you to do is I would like them to submit these goal tracking worksheets to you whenever you meet. They'll submit it and they'll say, okay, here's what we worked on since the last time we talked. Here's what we've done. Here's how we push the envelope forward. And as a mentor, it would be really wonderful if you could kind of walk through this with them and determine, is this actionable? Is it realistic? Does it make sense for where you are conceptually right now for the stage of your company? For example, is one of your obstacles, we're not getting enough followers on social media and, we need to increase our social presence and da-da-da-da. Well, that's great, but if you haven't even developed your product yet, why are you building an audience? So, really just helping them conceptually think about these in a very business savvy way. Again, with our GSSE students, the ones that are about to graduate, they should hopefully be a little bit further along this and they'll be able to think a little bit more critically. But for our new students coming into the program, they're really going to be in their conceptual phase, their ideation stage, and they're not really going to understand where they're going next. They might have a problem that they'd like to address, but they're not familiar yet with how do we think critically about that in order to achieve the solution goals for that problem. In addition to their goal tracking worksheet, we also have this, and this is a template that I've filled out with a random example just to give you an idea. So this is another project status tracking. So we've got our goal status, our goal tracking worksheet, and now we have our project status tracking. So again, it's another great way for our students to work within a structured format that will help them, again, consistently push the ball forward. I have found working with students and working with entrepreneurs in general, having done many accelerator and incubator programs and working in higher education, something happens when students are working within their structured classroom environment with their mentors, and they've got a very formulaic approach to how they're pursuing their business goals. And when they get ready to graduate, that stops, right? They don't have the same support network or the same structure that they did when they were full-time at college. So what we would like to do with this is start to introduce them to a process and a structure now, so that as they graduate, they can retain and keep going with that structured approach. And it doesn't feel like they were just, cut off, or, oh my gosh, where did my support network go? Where did my community go? I'm out here on my own and I have no idea. This is a great way that we can help guide them now, so that when that time comes, they don't feel that panic. They understand that they have these really strategic tools in their tool belt. And more importantly, as the Institute, we do support them after they graduate. So this is the structure that they'll continue to use. So it's a great way to just introduce them to it now, so that down the line they can less stress with learning a new process. So again, so we have in the top left corner here, we've got the accomplish this week. Then we have a plan to accomplish next week. And again, actionable, realistic, metrics driven. Long-term activity, so that they understand, we're doing short-term goals, long-term goals. And then barriers, again, going back to those obstacles. As they're working on some of their different goals, they might start to work on them. They're, okay, well, this week I did this. Next week, this is what I plan to do. And the long-term goal is here. Oh, but you know what? As I'm working on this, I realize that there really is a challenge that keeps presenting itself, and I'm not sure what to do with it. And so here's where the barriers come into play. And this is really a great talking point to work on with the students. Okay, this is where a lot of our goals might come from. And a lot of our, oops, sorry, I think my mic cut out there. This is where a lot of our goals will come from, and it's also a great way for us to, again, continue to support them and help them think critically about how do we overcome challenges. So again, down here, we have just a few, right? We've got our conceptual design. So what design phase are you in? So again, going back to our mentor sheet, what are they in? Conceptual, early development, ongoing. And then the date, so that we'll have each one of these, so that the students each week as they're doing this, they can fill this out and they can also get a sense of that too, right? Eventually, if our companies can get to this level, eventually they're going to need to go after funding. And two of the big things that investors are going to want to know is, one, what does your timeline look like? Since you started this company, what is the timeline of activities and events in the phased approach? What is your timeline? And two, what are some metrics? What are some metrics that you can show us that you're pushing the envelope, or that you're achieving your goals, or that we're making real impact within our communities? And so this is another great way for them to have a history of what they've done, so they don't, so that they can use these and build those metrics and make them realistic and valuable to our investor groups. Last, community partner contact, again, so we all know making those business connections and continuously pursuing new opportunities is really, really important. So again, just keeping it in their mind's eye of we don't want to drop the ball. And then this is a fun one here. This is the group skill session progress. So we have found over times, and oftentimes with students that create their companies while they're in the classroom environment, sometimes the teams work out fabulously, and that is so wonderful. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes individuals aren't putting in the same amount of work or the same amount of effort, and they don't have the same amount of care factor. So this is one great way where we can show, okay, out of the 10 sessions, Sarah participated in 1 session. Jose participated in 1 session. Mohammed participated in 3 sessions. Tom participated in 2 sessions. So we can kind of see who with the engagement level of each of the individual team members. We can also fine tune this as they continue down the line. You can say, okay, well, Sarah is really the marketing person. Jose is really the COO. There we've got Tom over here. Tom is the finance guy. And then we've got, he's business development. And then, maybe we've got Maria is CEO. So we can really kind of see the breakout of the skills as well as the engagement of each individual team member. Again, I think it's kind of important to know this, and just not necessarily for us to know. It's great information, but it's really important for our student groups to know and to keep track of this, because there is going to come a time where they do need to incorporate, where they are going to need to put together their formal operating procedures, where they are going to need to talk about team dynamics and percentage of equity for each of these partners, and whose idea and who's pushing these envelopes, and who's really taking the back seat and letting the others do the work, because not everybody is right for the team, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that we're really trying to help our students think about these really critical pieces like team dynamics now, before they go 5 years down the line and they have to, have a very hard conversation in buying out someone's equity so that they can maintain their brand and presence within the community without having a team member dragging them down. So yeah, so this is pretty much all of our documentation. And again, so our CSU Venture Development Platform workbook is really for our mentor side of things. This is where you can kind of keep track and really give us your 2 cents on how these companies are progressing, if there's problem areas. It also helps you to kind of understand ahead of time, let's say that a few of the companies are in the early development stage, but they are really just having a hard time with this MVP, their minimum viable product, and their product development. Everything on here is looking pretty good except for this one piece. Well, that's great information to know, because maybe we need to set them up with our makerspace at the Richardson Design Center and help them, give them the tools and the resources and the 3D printers, whatever they need to actually build their MVP. Or perhaps it's because they're missing an engineer on their team. And so we can start helping them find the missing pieces of their team within our CSU community. Or maybe they just need to talk to an expert in product development who's been there and done it before and can give them the best practices and advice on how do we move this forward. So I know this was a lot of information, and I hope my mic did not cut out too much. Please take a look at this and just, let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. Again, it looks a little intense and overwhelming at first glance, but I promise you it's not. It does look that way, but I promise you it's actually pretty easy to use, straightforward. And again, this is for your process as well. And I would love if you would give me your honest and direct feedback, because, our team here at the Institute for Entrepreneurship, we legitimately run like a startup ourselves. Everything we do is an iterative process. We are constantly fine-tuning, developing, pivoting on things that work, things that don't work. And the best way to do that is to start, right? So we are starting with this. It is by no means a final be-all, end-all. If you have suggestions for maybe subsets that should be added in, or maybe, you know, the organization of it, or if you have suggestions on different best practices you've seen that we can maybe implement, I am all for it. For me, you know, we really just want to support our mentors, support our CSU startups, and support our you know, internal campus community as well as our external local Fort Collins community. So the more feedback and the more fine tuning that we can do to this, the better program we're going to have long term. So anyways, thank you so very much. I will send all of this over to you with the link. And again, we've got 3 documents here: your Mentor CSU Venture Development Workbook. We've got our weekly project status tracking. And you can ask students, so it's up to you. If you want to have them submit both of these documents to you, great. And then here, the goal tracking worksheet. This one I definitely would like you to please take a look at with your students on a regular basis, just to make sure, again, we have these big, hairy, audacious goals, and sometimes they're not realistic or obtainable. And it takes somebody who's been there and done it before to really illuminate that for someone who has no idea what they're doing. I know it did for me. So, and with that, the other element is really just helping them fine tune their pitch, which I know you've had a wealth of knowledge doing this previously. And again, we can just kind of, if you need, we have these different subsets here, problem solution, which kind of go in line with our 5-minute pitches. But yeah, so again, give me feedback and please take a look. And if you have any questions, you have my email and my contact information. And I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you so much.